3 red cards, 2 goals, and a team that looked like they'd shown up on a day trip. This Mexico versus South Africa match was something else. And if you stick around, I've got some things to say about this South Africa performance that genuinely frustrated me. Drop a like, it really helps the channel, and let's get into it. Before we dive in, here's what we're covering. Why Mexico didn't even need to break a sweat to win this. What this result really tells us about South Africa's level right now. And why Raúl Jiménez deserves a moment of recognition tonight. Let's get started. Let's start with Mexico. And I'll say this straight away. It's refreshing to see a team show up with a clear, sharp game plan from minute 1. Mexico didn't come into this improvising. They studied South Africa, identified their strengths and weaknesses, and built a surgical setup around it. High but smart pressing, cutting off the goalkeeper's passing lanes, forcing the defenders to play under pressure. And when you do that, mistakes happen, and they happen fast. By the 8th minute, you know the type. A sloppy turnover in the South African backline off the back of a well-executed press. And there's Keenan, central, a strike that doesn't miss. 1-0. Game basically decided. And here's where Mexico did something smart that a lot of teams wouldn't do. They took their foot off the gas. They stopped sprinting everywhere. They settled, controlled the tempo, and waited. Some people watching called this stretch boring. No, that's management. That's mature football. You know what I mean? When you're up a goal against a team sitting in a back 5, you don't need to expose yourself. You wait, you let the opponent come out, and when they do, you punish them. That's exactly what happened on the second goal, with that cross from Alvarado and Jimenez's header. And I want to take a moment on Jimenez here, because this man deserves respect. He lost his father back in March. He himself nearly died from a head injury back in 2020. And here he is, on the biggest stage in football, in his own country, in front of his own fans, and he scores. Tears in his eyes. That's not a movie script, that's real life. Massive respect to him. On the Mexican side, I also want to highlight Keenan, who had a top quality game, Alvarado, who was sharp down the flank, and Reyes, who controlled his zone well. There's real quality in this squad, and what stands out most is the collective discipline. Nobody's trying to be the hero, everyone just does their job. That's what a real World Cup team looks like. Now let's talk about South Africa, and honestly, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, I was disappointed. Genuinely disappointed, because we know what this team is capable of. During AFCON, they showed they could play in transition. They had players who could break lines and create danger. And then they show up here in a back 5, 3 at the back, 5 at the back, whatever you want to call it, in a World Cup opener against a host nation, in a stadium that erupted in Mexican music every time the home side scored. What does that setup tell you about a team's mindset? It tells you they're scared. It tells you they came in thinking, if we can avoid a heavy loss, that's a win in itself. And when your ambition in a World Cup match is just damage control, this is what you get. Passes going nowhere, long balls hoofed away without purpose, forwards who were nowhere to be found. Foster, Reiners, did you even notice them out there tonight? I barely did. And speaking of things you shouldn't miss, stick around because I've got more to say, and don't forget to subscribe if this is your first time here. All right, back to it. South Africa's numbers. 80% pass completion on paper. But when you actually watch those passes, it's backwards passes, sideways passes, nothing progressive, nothing with intent. 30% on long balls. Somewhere between 10 and 25% on duels won. Folks, those are not World Cup numbers. Those are the numbers of a team playing well below its level and knowing it. And 2 shots on target across the entire match. 2. Basically the same number as red cards they picked up. And speaking of red cards, this match had a full collection of them. Sitoli first, directly responsible for the opening goal and then picking up a red on top of it. I won't even get into the mental state of that player after the final whistle. Then Montez on the Mexican side, coming in late with a reckless challenge on Mudo, red card as well. And to top it all off, Zwain with what can only be described as a slap to the face. Not a foul, a slap. At that point, this stopped being football and turned into pure theatre. 3 red cards, 2 goals, more red cards than goals in this match. And I have to ask, did South Africa even have a plan B once their defensive setup got exposed in the 8th minute? Because what we saw was 0 adjustment, 0 risk taking, 0 change in approach that could have thrown Mexico off. Second half, basically a carbon copy of the first half. That's genuinely concerning going forward. And let's talk about what's next, because the group situation is getting interesting. Mexico, with this 2-0 win in match 1, have essentially put 1 foot into the knockout stage already. First game, 3 points, 2-goal margin. That's a massive statement at a World Cup, and it puts real pressure on the rest of the group. They can approach their second match against Korea with more composure, although Montez will be suspended and Korea are no easy opponent. This could end up being a match for top spot in the group, so they can't afford to relax. But Mexico clearly has the tools to handle it. For South Africa, the picture is much tougher. A 2-0 defeat, a key player suspended, and tougher tactical tests still to come in this group. There needs to be a serious reset, and Hugo Bruce needs to rethink the approach. Coming out with a deep defensive block and almost nothing going forward simply isn't going to work against teams at this level. We've seen what this team can do when they actually play to their identity. The talent is there, but talent doesn't win matches if you show up playing scared from the first whistle. You know what I mean? What honestly strikes me the most is that Mexico won this match operating at maybe 30% of their actual capacity. Possibly less. Quinón, Jiménez and Alvarado had good moments, but we all know this team has so much more in the tank and they didn't even need to dig deep. South Africa made it so easy for them that the game almost played itself. That's the real story here. It's not that Mexico were world beaters tonight. It's that South Africa were genuinely, alarmingly below their level. And I'm not saying this to be harsh. I'm saying it because it's exactly what we saw. Heavy touches, passes with no tempo, broken combinations, attacking patterns that just weren't there. All of that in one match isn't bad luck. That's a structural and mental issue. Either way, this was quite an opener for the 2026 World Cup. We got drama, we got emotion, we got a beautiful story with Jimenez, and we also got a real wake-up call for South African football. But that's what the World Cup does. It doesn't forgive. It exposes the teams that are ready and the ones that are still figuring out why they're even there. And tonight, South Africa fell into the second category. If you enjoyed this breakdown, smash that like button. It genuinely helps the channel grow. Let me know in the comments, do you think I'm being too harsh on South Africa, or is this analysis fair? I always read and reply to comments, and if this is your first time on the channel, this is where we break down World Cup matches with honest, no filter analysis. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Catch you in the next one.